In this segment, I want to do a real quick explanation of how to manage the copies or versions of the image files you make once you start editing images. I won't go into the full image workflow here. In other words, how to manage the entire library of images that you have. I have a separate video workshop that talks about Adobe Lightroom, which I think is the best program for doing that. But let me just refer you to that other workshop on my website if you're interested. So once you start editing images, you're going to end up with more than one copy. And the reason for that is the initial copy of your image, that digital negative, the capture that you downloaded from your camera and you backed up, you're never going to change that. Right? Whether you shoot JPEG or RAW, that digital negative never gets modified. If you do decide you want to edit the image, and you want to do it in Photoshop, you're going to end up with at least one more copy or version of the file. And I recommend just one. Let me show you how that's done and why I recommend just one. So let me open the digital capture of that picture of my granddaughter Lena. Here I see a new screen. It's the Adobe Camera Raw screen. I won't bother to stop and explain it in this workshop. Let me just open the image. And now let's imagine that we start editing the image. And just for illustration, let's make those same layers that we made in the previous segment. So I'll get a new pixel layer here. Let it have the default name. We'll get a paintbrush. We'll make the brush a little bigger. And we'll paint a black squiggle right down the left side here. We'll make another layer. A new pixel layer, layer 2. Using the default name, we're going to change our brush color. Let's change it to blue and put a second squiggle on layer 2. And now let's imagine I'm done editing, or at least done editing in this session. I want to save the file, but I want to save it with all these layers and structure that I've put into it so far, so I can come back and resume editing or even change my mind. So I'm going to do a file save here. Photoshop is going to assume that the format I want is Photoshop format. That's fine. By convention, that format has the file extension .psd, and it's suggesting I put it right back in the same folder that I got the digital capture from. I recommend that, to keep the digital capture and your master edit copy all in one place. So I'm going to go ahead and click Save here. The file is saving out, and once that finishes, we'll close it up in Photoshop and we'll open it up again. So there, it's finished. I'm going to close the file. Now let's imagine, I go away, I do other things, and I want to come back and resume editing that image. Well, I'm not going to edit the original capture anymore. I'm going to go back and edit that PSD file, or the Photoshop file. There it is. I'm going to click on it. And it's going to come up in Photoshop right where I left off, with all of the structure and layers that I made. Now this is really important, because this style of editing, where I put every major change on a separate layer and I don't change my base layer, is something that I call non-destructive editing. And when you use non-destructive editing in Photoshop, you don't have to make a lot of copies of your edited images. One copy if you like it this way, or one copy if you like it that way. Because if the changes are on separate layers, I can always delete, turn off the visibility of layers, discard layers, rearrange layers. So I can effectively undo any changes I've made to the editing just by manipulating the layer stack. And that's a huge advantage, because it not only lets me try different techniques for the rendering, but it also lets me have one master copy of the edited file, so that anytime I want to go back and resume editing, I have only one copy to find. It's the master edit, the PSD file. That isn't a complete description of non-destructive editing. If you want more information on non-destructive editing, I have another video workshop on non-destructive editing in Photoshop, and you can find that on my website. For this segment, I think that's as terse a description as I can make. The last thing maybe I'll add is that if you want to share your master edit copy maybe on a website, maybe in a club competition, maybe you want to get a printed copy, you will need to make a flattened JPEG version of the master edit. But you don't have to save that because it's what I call a derivative image. It's derived from the master edit copy. You can always make it again if you need to. And if you use a program like Lightroom, it's easier still to make those derived images. Okay, so that's it in short. You need 2 copies of your images, your digital negative, and your master edit.